Hello everyone, welcome to another course from 3IAM, and in this course I'm going to talk about APIs using Python Flask. As you might have already guessed that this course will fall in the application dimension. We'll be talking completely about application creation using APIs or application programming interfaces. And this is going to be the agenda. Even though the course is small, I'll try to make sure that I cover all the API basics and how we can create full-fledged functional APIs using Python's Flask library. So I'll start with the introduction of web applications and web services. What are web applications and what are web services? Then I'll give a high-level overview of client-server architecture. Again, it will be very high level because it's pretty simple to understand. Then I'll go a little bit deeper into HTTP basics, followed by the main topic, which is application programming interfaces or APIs. I'll also tell a little bit about REST APIs because we'll be using REST APIs to create our program. Now, once all these basics are done, I'll start with the introduction of Flask. Flask is a Python library which is used to create APIs and web applications using Python. Then I will tell you how to implement APIs using the Flask library. Obviously, I'll start with a very basic one. Then I'll go deeper into different kind of implementation scenarios. I'll also tell you how do you pass arguments and variables using the APIs. Because in most of the cases, you'll be passing arguments and variables to your programs. And then, as I said, I'll be showing you multiple coding exercises for various different scenarios using APIs. Real estate is small to list all the scenarios that I'm going to talk about, but rest assured that I'll cover as much as possible. And then finally, we'll build a web application using HTML and Flask. Now, I know that I am introducing HTML here, but I'll not talk about HTML, what is HTML, how do you code HTML, because it will be a very simple web page wherein we'll create a web page using HTML and run programs behind the scenes. And those programs will run using Python Flask and will use the HTML or web page to call those programs using APIs. So let's get started. Now, before proceeding further, let me tell you the prerequisites, and these are very essential prerequisites. If you already know about these, then you can skip the prerequisites, or else you'll have to understand or you'll have to go through the basics of Python course. If you are in 3IAM website, you can go through the course Python Essentials for Data Engineering. And if you are checking this course in YouTube playlist, you can go through the playlist named Python Basics. As I said, these are mandatory prerequisites. If you are already familiar with Python, then you can skip these prerequisites. All right, so let's start. Now I'm taking multiple steps back to tell you what programs, applications, and apps are. You might already know what these things are, but just a high level overview. Programs are used or helps us in multiple things in our day-to-day lives. For example, booking tickets, booking hotels, booking train tickets, airline tickets, etc. Getting food, groceries, medicines, etc. delivered to your home, online payments, so on and so forth. Now, for all these, either you can use the mobile app or web application. So when you use mobile app, what you do is that you open the phone and then open the corresponding app and then use it. If you are using a laptop, then what will you do? You will go to the website of that particular application and then do the necessary actions. So that's what programs, applications, or apps are. And as you already know that it has helped us a lot over the years, our life has become way easier than it used to be before. As I'm talking about programs and applications, so there are various programming languages which can be used to create these programs or applications or mobile apps. The most famous languages are Java, .NET, C Sharp, C++, Python, JavaScript, etc. There are specific programming languages for Android applications and iOS applications also. So you have these apps or applications at your disposal. Now, how do we interact with the programs as humans? So what we do if we have laptop, as I said, that you open the website of that particular application and then take necessary actions. Let's say you are trying to book a ticket or book a flight ticket, what will you do is that you'll go to the airline website, select the source and destination, make the payment and select the seat and then check out. So that's how we interact with the application or the program. And this is using laptops, so you'll have to go to the website. If you are using mobile applications or smartphones rather, it can be Android or iOS, we have apps installed in our mobile devices. And what you do is that you go to the app and then do the necessary actions. Again, I'll be taking the same example. Let's say you want to book a flight ticket. You open the app or the airline app, select the source and destination, make the payment and select the seat and then check out. And it holds true for all the other apps or applications that you can think of. Then we have desktop applications also, which are highly unlikely nowadays, but let's say you have a desktop application. What you do is that you open the desktop application and take the necessary actions as mentioned earlier. So this is what programs, applications or apps are. Whatever applications I have told you so far, for all those applications bearing the desktop application, you need an internet connection. So if you are booking a flight ticket or if you are booking a hotel or you are placing order for food delivery or grocery delivery or medicine delivery, whatever, we need internet. Once you open the laptop and if you want to use that application, you'll have to go to the website of that particular application. Same is the case with smartphone also. You open the app and then do the necessary actions. Now for all these cases, we need internet connection. So if internet connection is not there, we cannot do these things because all these are happening over the web or online. So you might say that all these are web applications. Now what are web applications? Web applications are software programs which are accessed through a web browser or through a smartphone app. That's what web applications are. But the actual program runs on remote servers. The programs do not run on our laptop or on our smartphones. We open the app, whatever we do, let's say again, I'll take the same example of booking a flight ticket. We open the airline app, select the source and destination, make the payment, select the seat and check out. Whenever we do these things, we send request to the remote servers. What are remote servers? Remote servers are something that is sitting somewhere else remotely, maybe in a data center or in the cloud. So these web applications are actually running on remote servers, and these applications deliver functionalities over the internet. Because these applications use internet to deliver the service, that's why these are called web applications. Let's say this is the application which is running on remote servers. It can be on any cloud or on-premise data center also. And if it is cloud, it can be either AWS or GCP or Azure. Application is running on remote servers on AWS or GCP or Azure, maybe on a Kubernetes cluster or maybe on virtual servers. And then if we have the laptop, what you do is that, let's say we are trying to open a bank account or we are trying to make some online payment, we type the URL of that particular bank. We type and then press enter. And of course, we authenticate ourselves using our user ID and password. And then we make the online payment, let's say. For all these things, the request goes to the application which are running on the remote servers. And what remote servers do, it sends or tells us, okay, this is the UI. And using this UI, we do certain operations. So let's say I want to buy certain product. It will show us the product and its corresponding detail. Whenever you click on buy now, that's an action that we are taking. A request would be sent to the remote application, or request would be sent to the application which are running on the remote servers. And then it will follow its application lifecycle or application process. Then you can buy a certain thing, or you can make online payment, or you can book a flight ticket. So that's what web applications are. As these are applications or programs which are running on remote servers, but their functionalities are delivered over the internet, that's why these are called web applications. Now let's look at a very simple application structure, how these things happen. So I'll take example of the airline booking or maybe online retail, whatever. So we have this user and then we have this UI application. What is UI? UI is user interface. We type the website of the airline provider and then we get a web page, or we get a page rather. and we authenticate ourselves and then select source, destination, and so on. And then we press enter, or we click on book now or buy now. So let's say the application directly talks to the database to acknowledge the booking or to book the ticket. So as users, we interact with the UI application or user interface application, which is over the web, over the internet, and that application in turn talks to the database. We never talk to the database directly. This is the simplest application structure that I can show you. You have an UI application or web application or a web page. We do certain actions, and based on those actions, the application talks to the database. Database is also a kind of a program which is running in a server. The question is, how do you communicate with the app or the application, and how the UI application communicates with the database. So it might seem trivial for us when we do the operations, but these are not trivial operations. A lot of things go behind the scenes for these things to happen. Now, our communications, by our we mean humans, we open the app, press certain buttons, open the website and press certain buttons, and that's how we communicate. We are communicating with the application, which is the user interface application, which is shown to us. But the user interface application might be talking to another program or which is a database. So how the UI application communicates with the database? I'm not answering this right now. Just keep that in your mind. Let's look at another application structure wherein we have the same UI application. It can be on our smartphones or on our laptops. So we open the website and press the necessary buttons. Now, instead of UI application talking to the database, we have another backend application which actually talks to the database. So whenever we take certain action, for example, booking a ticket, selecting a seat, selecting the source and destination, what happens is that all those things are actually sent to the backend application by UI application, and the backend application talks to the database. So here, the communication between humans and programs happen only at this particular layer, right? So we open the website or we open the app and then we press certain buttons. But here onwards, the programs communicate with each other. The UI application is communicating with the backend application, and backend application is communicating with the database, which is also a type of a program. Now, if I want to make it a little bit more complex, again, let's say we have an UI application, and the UI application is calling application 1, which is talking to the database. At the same time, application 1 is calling another application, which is application 2, which is talking to another database, which is database 2. So this is a little complicated from the place where we started, where your UI application was talking to a single database. But here, UI application is talking to one application, which is in turn talking to the database and communicating with another application, which again is communicating with the database. So we know that how do we communicate with the app or the application using the UI application, which is the user interface. We are given buttons, we are given next buttons, we are given radio buttons, we are given drop downs, etc. Now, whenever you select something, the UI application or the front end application, which it is also known as, that application will talk to other applications behind the scene. So this is how the application structure is. Of course, this is a very simple application structure. And if you have heard about microservices architecture, if you have seen, of course, you have seen multiple web applications or mobile applications. Those are not as simple as what I'm showing you here. Those are way more complicated. So single application would be communicating with multiple different applications. But what I'm trying to show you here is that the communication is not only between humans and the programs. So it's not only us that communicate with the program. We press the button and then the program would communicate with other programs also. Before going to the next slide, I just wanted to conclude with one more remark that combination of multiple applications or a single application is known as service or web service. So in this case, application 1 and application 2 combined together can be known as service, or only application 1 can also be known as a service, or only application 2 can also be called as a service. Now, why there are so many different types? Because you can imagine, let's say application 1 is catering to one business component. So then application 1 would be a single service. But let's say application 1 and 2 both are needed to cater to the same business requirement, then both of them combined together would be known as a service. And these are called web services. And I have kept the diagram as is. We have the UI application which is talking to the application 1. Application 1 is talking to database 1, and application 2 is talking to database 2. So what are web services? What is the definition of web service? Web service is a set of protocols and standards that allow data to be exchanged between different applications or systems. Now here if you see, I have 5 different applications. The UI application, application 1, application 2, database 1 and database 2. You can think of database as an application also, because database is essentially a program which is running in a server. So what does web service entail? Using web service rather, we communicate or exchange data or information between the applications. So UI applications would communicate with application 1. Application 1 will communicate with application 2 and database 1, and application 2 will communicate or exchange data with database 2. So we do this using web service. So a simpler definition would be web services are used to communicate between application programs. And there are certain standards and there are certain protocols that will have to follow to make this communication to happen. Now, when I say communicate, what I mean by that, I mean sending and receiving data. So there's no other way that programs would communicate with each other, right? So the only way that one program would communicate with another program is by using data. And it happens anywhere, right? So our communication is also happening using data or using information. I am giving you certain information and you are receiving that information. So the same thing happens between programs also without the talking. So the applications, one application will talk to another application or communicate with another application by sending data or information and receiving data or information. So applications send and receive data or information between one another. So in this diagram, I have just shown you the sending of data from one application to another, but there would be receiving data also. So in this case, UI application is sending a request to application 1, which is again sending another request to database 1, which is nothing but sending data or information. And database 1 will send another set of data to application 1, which in turn would be sent to UI application after doing some processing. Same is the case with application 1 and application 2 also. Application 1 would send certain data or information in the form of request to application 2, and application 2 will do the same to database 2. Database 2 will send the response, and the response would be in the form of data or information, and the same thing would be sent from application 2 to application 1, which will again be sent to UI application. So the communication between the applications happen using data. UI application will send data to application 1, which will send data to database 1. Database will send data back to application 1, which will again send data back to your application. And same is true for application 2 and database 2 also. Now this communication between the programs happen using application programming interface or APIs. So APIs are used to communicate between the applications. You might ask, why am I talking about APIs in the web services slide? Because these are used interchangeably. We can call a single API as a web service, or multiple APIs combined together can also create a web service. So these are used interchangeably. There are few more terminologies that I want to discuss before going into the details of APIs or application programming interface. The first one is client-server architecture and request response protocol. So again, I'll take the same diagram. We have the UI application and application 1, which is talking to database 1, application 2 is talking to database 2, etc. What are clients? In a client-server architecture, clients are essentially the programs which send requests and receives responses from the service provider or services or to other programs. That's what clients are. Client is again a program which will send a request, wait for some time and receive a response, from the service provider. Now here the service provider, as I told you in 2 slides back, it can be a single application or a combination of multiple applications which will provide the service that you are looking for. And servers provide the services by sending the data to the clients. Servers are also application programs, but they receive requests from the clients, do some processing, run some programming logic, or sends requests to, let's say, databases or any other applications, get the responses and send the response back to the clients. So both client and server are application programs. Now in this case, we have UI application, application 1, 2, database 1 and 2, which are clients and which are servers. So we'll have to look each one of them in isolation. As I said that we have client and server. So one component would be client and one component would be server. Between UI application and application 1, UI application would be the client and application 1 would be the server, because UI application is sending the request and application 1 is sending the response back to the UI application. But between application 1 and database 1, application 1 would be the client and database 1 would be the server, because application 1 is sending request to database and the database server is sending response back to application 1. You might have guessed that between application 1 and application 2, application 1 would be the client and application 2 would be the server. Between application 2 and database 2, again, application 2 would be the client and database 2 would be the server. So as you can see, there are multiple clients and multiple servers in a very simple application architecture. The same application program can be client and server both. When it receives a request from another program, it becomes a server. But when it calls another program or sends request to another program, it becomes the client. Now all of them work together to give you the experience that we get. That's what client-server architecture is. When you talk about requests and response, clients would be sending the requests and server would be sending the response. So in this case, UI application is sending the request to application 1 and application 1 is sending the response. Between application 1 and database 1, application 1 is sending the request to database 1 and database 1 is sending the response back to application 1. So that is the definition of client and server, right? Same is the case between application 1 and 2. Application 1 is sending the request and application 2 is sending the response. Between application 2 and database 2, application 2 is sending the request and database 2 is sending the response. So this is what a client-server architecture means. As you can see, it is very simple. We can have multiple clients and multiple servers in the same application. So let's say this is a single service or single web service. There can be multiple clients and multiple servers. And the server can become client also and vice versa. So now having said that, let's look at the request and response in a little bit more detail. And that's where I introduce you to HTTP, whose full form is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Same example, I have removed the UI application here. Now all these communications, right, the request and response that I have told you in the previous slide, those are happening using HTTP protocol or Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So what is HTTP? It's a communication protocol between clients and servers. So how the client would send request, how the data should be, how the server would send the response, in what format, in JSON or XML format. So there are certain protocols that have to be followed by the applications or the clients, and there are certain protocols that have to be followed by other applications which are servers. So HTTP is a communication protocol. This is a single line definition of HTTP, which is a communication protocol between clients and servers. So what is getting communicated between the programs? As you already know, sending data or information and receiving data or information. So you are sending data from client to server and you are receiving data from server to client. Data is also information, right? All right, now let's say you have this client and server. So the request that client makes are actually HTTP requests. And the responses that servers send, those are HTTP responses. So whatever arrows that you have seen so far between the programs, all are HTTP requests and responses. Those are not plain requests and responses, meaning that there are certain protocols that are getting followed in the communication. As part of those protocols, HTTP has certain request methods. So send the request and get the response. So when you are sending a request, you have to send it using something called methods. And there are three types of methods that are mostly used. The first one is get method, which is used to read data from server. Then we have post method, which is used to send data to server so that server can persist it or store it in a persistent storage or a permanent storage. And then put method, which is used to modify data on the server. So get is similar to reading data, post is similar to inserting data, and put is similar to updating data or overwriting data. There are other methods also. I'll not go into the details of the other methods, but these are the most used HTTP request methods in API communication. And I'll show you these methods in our hands-on also, how we can use these methods to read data from server or send data or modify data on server. So these are the basic concepts that are needed to understand API or application programming interface. So what is an API? Just a recap, APIs are used for communication between the programs, or applications use APIs to communicate with each other, right? And these are ways and means for a program to interface or communicate with another program. That's why it is called interface, application programming interface. Interface is nothing but communicating. So if you remember, I showed you the UI application, right? Which is user interface application. Why that is called as user interface? Because we humans are the users and we interface with the program using that particular application. That's why that is called an UI application. In this case, the communication is between different programs. So that's why it is called application programming interface. So it is a way to call a program for another program which follows client-server architecture. So we have the UI application and then you have the backend application. Again, I'm taking the example that I had shown you at the beginning. I've removed the database here from here. Then we have UI application. Then UI application is talking to application 1, which is talking to application 2. And all these backend applications, application 1, application 2 will be talking to the databases. But the communication or the talking would happen using APIs. So let's say backend application has one API whose name is API. Application 1 and application 2 has their own APIs, API 1 and API 2. So instead of talking or communicating directly with the application, the arrow that you see here, these are not to the program directly, these are to the APIs. So the communication or sending and receiving of data or sending and receiving of information happen via the APIs. And that's what we are going to create in this particular course using Python and its Flask library.